fundamentally, look, one of the things that I found a little astounding throughout is that for all of the understandable criticism of the way Israel has conducted itself in Gaza, you hear virtually nothing from anyone since October 7th about Hamas. Why there hasn't been a unanimous chorus around the world for Hamas to put down its weapons, to give up the hostages, to surrender. I don't know what the answer is to that.
That's news to me, because all you'll hear from anyone with even a little bit of power in the United States, whether they're in the media or in government, is that we should condemn Hamas. And that is the immediate deflection as soon as anyone questions the conduct of the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, with that in mind, outgoing Secretary of State, I just said that out loud for the first time and it felt real good. But outgoing Secretary of State Antony Blinken sat down with the New York Times to discuss the Biden administration's legacy. So this should be fun. And you won't be surprised to hear that he refuses to accept any responsibility for any of the bad decisions that the Biden administration might have made foreign policy-wise, especially as it pertains to Israel and how they've carried out their brutal war on Gaza. Now, when the host, Lulu Garcia-Navarro, asked Antony Blinken about Israel's conduct and the high death toll among women, children, elderly people, and other civilians in Gaza, Blinken repeatedly dodged the question.
Israel's response has been extreme. The latest UN figures put the Palestinian death toll at 45,000. Over 90% of Gaza's population is now displaced. The population is starving. All hospitals have been destroyed. In November, a UN committee released a report that found Israel's warfare practices, quote, consistent with the characteristics of genocide. I know you don't agree with that estimation, but do you believe that Israel's actions have been consistent with the rules of war?
Let's step back for a second and think about where we were on October 6th, and then where we were on October 7th, and where we've been since then.
Yeah, we've been thinking about that a lot, actually. And he could just continue skirting the question, just continue. So he says that the United States had 3 goals. Number 1, making sure an October 7th style attack never happens again. Number 2, stopping the war from expanding to other fronts, which obviously the United States has utterly failed at. And then making sure the women, children, and men of Gaza who had nothing to do with the attack were as protected as possible. Another massive failure given the high death toll among civilians. So Lulu Garcia-Navarro tries again to get him to answer whether Israel has violated any human rights laws, any laws as it pertains to international war crimes. Let's see how he answers this time.
I mean, even Israel's former Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Alon referred to what's happening in Gaza as war crimes and ethnic cleansing. I mean, this is internal criticism. This is not external. So I guess I would repeat the question and ask you, has Israel respected the rules of war in Gaza?
We, as you know, have looked and continue to look at that in depth, and we put out our own reports on this with our own assessments. And when it comes to the actions that Israel has taken in its defense, in its just defense, in trying to make sure that October 7th never happens again, we've said from day one that how Israel does that matters. And throughout, starting on day one, we've tried to ensure that people had what they needed to get by.
But later in the interview, he accidentally confesses that Israel's kind of stood in the way of getting the people of Gaza the humanitarian aid they need to survive. Let's just take a quick look at that, and I'll go to you, Cenk.
The very first trip that I made to Israel, 5 days after October 7th, I spent with my team 9 hours in the Kiryat, the IDF's headquarters in Tel Aviv, 6 stories underground with the Israeli government, including the prime minister, including arguing for hours on end about the basic proposition that the humanitarian assistance needed to get to Palestinians in Gaza. In public opinion, this wasn't just the prime minister or a given leader in Israel. This was an entire society that didn't want any assistance getting to a single Palestinian in Gaza. I argued that for 9 hours. President Biden was planning to come to Israel a few days later. And in the course of that argument, when I was getting resistance to the proposition of humanitarian assistance getting in, I told the prime minister, I'm going to call the president and tell him not to come if you don't allow this assistance to start flowing. And I called the president and to make sure that he agreed with that, and he fully did. Anyway, we got the agreement to begin assistance through Rafah.
So in other words, there are violations of human rights in the way Israel is prosecuting this war. I mean, he accidentally admitted it, but he admitted it. And by the way, I should note that the reporter presses him further, and he's quick to defend Israel, saying that their intentions were good, but at times the results have been insufficient. Cenk.
Yeah, look, we're going to miss the Secretary of State for Israel, but don't worry, we're not going to miss him for long, because Marco Rubio will be the next Secretary of State for Israel. These people are not our Secretary of State at all, and not 1%. He works for Israel. He might literally work for Israel. We'll get to that in a minute. But all of this is absurd, because look, sometimes I ask with politicians, are they really this stupid, or are they trying to deceive you? In the case of Blinken, we know he's not stupid. So when he says, well, how come nobody's talking about Hamas? He knows everybody's talking about Hamas, and he knows that that's a misdirection, because we're not giving Hamas $30 billion of our money. We're giving Israel $30 billion of our money. That's why the conversation is about Israel. So it's not like there's a shortage of people condemning Hamas across the world. Every government on earth has condemned Hamas. The United Nations has condemned Hamas. Everyone has condemned Hamas. And they killed 1,200 people. Israel has killed now 46,000 people, the great majority of which are civilians. And we helped finance their murder and slaughter of the Palestinian people. And Anthony Blinken helped them to do that. He covered up for them in every instance. When she asked about it, he looks visibly uncomfortable. And then I knew what he was gonna say first in that second clip that we showed you. I knew first, we gotta talk about October 6th and October 7th. And then in every answer, October 7th, as if the conflict started on October 7th, as if the Israelis have not been brutally occupying the Palestinians for 57 years, as if their land grabs and their theft of nonstop of Arab land isn't the core cancer that's causing the problem. And then as if October 7th happened this October 7th, and still the war would have been way too long and disproportionate, but it happened last October 7th. So Israel has been slaughtering with our money, and we're about to send them more money, more weapons to slaughter more people. And here comes their Secretary of State pretending to be our Secretary of State, doing nonstop excuses and ass kissing for a foreign government that has destroyed not only their reputation, but our reputation. Anthony Blinken is beloved in Washington because he's one of the elites that profit off of all of these wars, and it puts a pretty face and nice language to it, and nonstop excuses and propaganda for a foreign government. But the reality is that they represent that government, not us. And I loathe these people. He's been a terrible Secretary of State, nothing but nonstop failure, a grotesque failure of a human being. And so now, but in Washington, oh my God, feted, roses thrown at his feet. Such an intelligent way to cover for Israelis' war crimes, and way to force the American citizens that don't have enough wages or healthcare, or by the way, any of the things that the Israelis have, force them to pay the Israelis for killing more Palestinians. That's all he's ever done. He'll go down in history as not a diplomat, but as a marketing executive for the state of Israel.
Well, I mean, that's essentially what he is, and we'll get to the details of that in just a minute. But in regard to funding and weaponry and military support for Israel, on their way out, Blinken and Joe Biden are hoping to give Israel one last gift in the form of yet another weapons package. Now, the reporting around this has been complete and utter dog crap, because to be honest, like, I want to know the details of what they're planning to do here. Is this a weapons package that they're expecting American citizens to bankroll on top of the on top of the $17.9 billion in military aid to Israel since October 7th? Is this going to be basically an approval for Israel to buy American-made weapons? But regardless of what those details are, the package is expected to be worth about $8 billion. Again, does this mean Israel is going to spend $8 billion of its own money to buy American-made weapons? Or is this additional funding that American taxpayers are going to be on the hook for? And so this new package does need to be approved by the US House and Senate Foreign Relations Committees. So we'll see how that develops. However, in this interview with the Times, Blinken was asked why the US is continuing to arm Israel. And here's what he had to say.
Hamas is no longer deemed a threat in the way that it was. And the population has been completely decimated. So I'm curious, why still provide these weapons to Israel?
First of all, we have been and we remain fundamentally committed to Israel's defense. And unfortunately, it faces adversaries and enemies from all directions. And that means that the support that the United States provides over many administrations, Republican and Democrat, over many years, that support is absolutely vital to making sure that Israel is able to defend itself, that it can deter aggression coming from many other quarters, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Iran, whether it's the many Iranian-backed proxies, whether it's the Houthis, you name it. That support is vital to making sure Israel has a deterrent, has an adequate defense, and in turn, that means that we're not going to have an even broader, wider conflict that results in more death.
I'm sure attempting to steal territory in Lebanon and Syria has nothing to do with the hostility that's been directed toward the government of Israel. But nonetheless, look, there's a huge conflict of interest here as it pertains to Anthony Blinken. I raised this conflict of interest when Joe Biden tapped him to be in his administration as Secretary of State. And that has to do with the fact that Anthony Blinken directly himself formed a consulting firm known as West Exec Advisors. And The Intercept had written about this. So let me just give you a few excerpts. Their focus has been to enhance the capabilities of defense, intelligence, and law enforcement agencies. Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, and more than a dozen other Biden officials also worked for this consulting firm before joining the Biden administration. But little is known about their client list, and that's because of how this consultant firm was structured, allowing them to essentially hide who their clients are. So the staffers are not considered lobbyists. And so as a result, they are not required to disclose who they work for. So if they're working for foreign governments, we wouldn't know that because they don't have to report it. Mandy Smithberger, who's the director of the Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight, told Politico a few years ago, by not directly advocating for federal dollars on behalf of West exec clients, they don't have to publicly divulge who is paying them and for what activities, such as the connections they make with government agencies. They avoid becoming registered lobbyists or foreign agents and are instead becoming strategic consultants, she said. However, we do know that Blinken advised companies like AT&T, FedEx, Facebook, Uber, and defense contractors like Boeing, which of course sells weapons to Israel. And additionally, West Exec advised Windward, a digital surveillance company that was founded by Israeli intelligence officers and counts former Israeli Army Chief of Staff Gabi Ashkenazi as a board member. So, I mean, if we actually had a government that served the best interests of the American people, we would not allow these types of conflicts of interest to stand, but nonetheless they do. And that's the result, and that is what results in the type of foreign policy that we're seeing, especially as it pertains to Israel. Cenk.
They all should be. They're lobbyists. Who are we kidding? They're lobbyists. All these people in Washington are lobbyists. All the people who pretend to be consultants in DC are lobbyists, and half of them represent foreign governments, and they hide that. They should all be outed as foreign agents, and if they didn't register as foreign agents, they should be arrested. They all work. These guys work for foreign governments, and then they go into our government and they betray this country. And they say, "Oh no, you have to funnel money to my client." I mean, oops, I get to hide my clients. You have to funnel your money, your hard-earned money, to a different government, and you have to serve them loyally. And no matter how many wars they start and how many people they slaughter, you all have to give your paycheck over to them. But now I'm not going to tell you who I work for. So I work for. They work for Israeli companies. We just told you that. They work for companies that fund Israel's wars like Boeing. We just told you that. Do they also work for Israel? Oh, no, technically we're not lobbyists. No, you are lobbyists. Get the hell out of here. And then why are we unclear as to whether this is an actual sale or not? Because mainstream media are a bunch of liars. So they keep calling it a sale, but here, I'll read it from ABC News about other things that they called a sale. Remember how Anna told you we've already given them $17.9 billion? I want to read you that paragraph because that also got characterized as a sale in so many articles that I read. Here's the paragraph this today. The weapons package would add to a record of at least $17.9 billion in military aid that the US has provided Israel since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. So wait, is it aid or is it sales? I think what it is it looks like they're being characterized as sales so the American people aren't furious, but then we're financing those so-called sales. So it ain't a sale at all. It's just a giant gift to Israel, gift after gift. And we're not giving them healthcare, we're not giving them positive gifts that would help the Israeli people. We're giving them gifts to murder Palestinians and commit war crimes. And then all of our media is lying on their behalf and calling it, a sale, as if we got something out of it. I know that's what's happened in the past. We're still not clear about the 8 billion because every reporter in the country sucks and won't clarify if it's a sale or if it's a goddamn gift from the American taxpayers to kill more people and start more wars. And finally, that gets to the last point here. He said several times, we did such a great job of preventing this war from broadening. Did you? That's another giant lie. Israel is bombing 5 to 7 neighbors, depending on how you count. It's bombed Syria, it's bombed Lebanon, it's bombed West Bank, Gaza Strip, it's bombed Yemen, it's bombed Iran. How is this not broadening the war? Yeah, those countries have very limited ability to bomb back. So every once in a while, Iran will bomb back. Hezbollah has these pea shooters that they fire, et cetera, or used to fire. And then every time Blinken goes out there and goes, oh my God, poor Israel. Now they get to slaughter tens of thousands of dollars. Give them more money, give them more money. Let them slaughter more Arabs. Who gives a goddamn about Arabs anyway? So that's the job of our Secretary of State, right? And you heard what he called it, a just defense. Does this look like justice to you? Over 25,000 women and children slaughtered by the terrorist state of Israel.
And that's an
underestimate.
underestimate.
Had to pay for all of it. None of that is just. It's injustice defined. Israel is Goliath, and those poor Palestinians are David, and they're being crushed by people like Anthony Blinken. He just puts on a suit and he uses fancy words, but he's a thug who loves to finance terrorism as long as it's done by Israel and companies that pay his bills. So that's the kind of corrupt, terrible person Anthony Blinken is. And don't worry though, he'll be replaced by someone just as bad, if not worse, because Marco Rubio is gonna come in for Donald Trump. And Marco Rubio is also a neocon, warmonger, and totally owned by Israel. So our next Secretary of State will also serve Israel very dutifully. Maybe he'll care about us as a 13th priority.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.